Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a topic that affects nearly every household in the Philippines and holds some truly surprising paradoxes that defy simple explanation. We're talking about the Philippine rice industry. You might think you know rice, but the sources we've gathered here reveal a complex, often counterintuitive world of economics, livelihoods, and, well, surprising shifts in profitability that will likely change how you view this staple crop.
It's a truly fascinating deep dive because, at first glance, the data presents a significant puzzle. On one hand, the Philippines stands as the world's 8th largest rice producer, a substantial player on the global stage, contributing, about 2.8% to the world's total rice output?
8th largest. That sounds pretty significant.
It is. Yet, almost unbelievably, simultaneously, it holds the distinction of being the world's largest rice importer.
The largest importer, while being the 8th largest producer.
Exactly. Status it's consistently held in recent years, including 2010, 2023, and 2024. This stark juxtaposition immediately signals a significant persistent gap between domestic supply and, burgeoning demand. And our sources really help us unpack the layers of this economic and social paradox.
That's the heart of it, isn't it? Our mission today is to cut through the noise, extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from these detailed reports, and give you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on this cornerstone of the nation's economy and, crucially, its food security. We'll explore who truly profits, assess the intricate market dynamics at play, and identify the massive challenges alongside some equally compelling opportunities that are shaping this vital industry.
So as we begin to peel back these layers, what stands out to you as particularly compelling from our initial scan of the material? Let's start by truly appreciating the sheer scale and profound importance of rice in the Philippines. It's far more than just food. It's deeply ingrained in the nation's culture, its social fabric, and its economy. What's fascinating here is its powerful dual role. It's an indispensable dietary staple, but also a profound economic driver that touches millions of lives daily.
Indeed, the sources underscore just how foundational rice is to the Philippine diet. It represents, a staggering 35% of the average calorie intake for the general population.
35%, just from rice.
Yeah. But that figure dramatically intensifies for the most vulnerable households. For those in the lowest income quartile, rice consumption skyrockets, jumping to a staggering 60-65% of their daily calorie intake.
60 to 65%.
Mm-hmm. This isn't just about sustenance, it's about a basic human right, a foundational element of food security for millions across the archipelago. Without sufficient, affordable rice, millions would face severe nutritional deficits, and the very stability of countless families would be compromised. You see rice at every meal, at every gathering, and every celebration. It's the centerpiece.
And beyond the dinner table, it's a massive employer, providing a direct and indirect source of income for millions of people, particularly in the sprawling rural areas of the Philippines. It's a lifeline.
Absolutely. Rice cultivation provides a critical source of livelihood for an estimated 11.5 million farmers and their family members, permeating the very fabric of rural society. As of 2020, there were approximately 2.4 million direct rice farmers in the Philippines.
2.4 million farmers?
That massive workforce speaks to its cultural and social significance. However, this also raises an important question. What does it mean for the future of a nation's food security and its rural economy, when the average age of these vital producers is between 53 and 56 years?
53 to 56, that's quite high for such physically demanding work.
It is. And this demographic trend is something we'll circle back to later, as it poses significant long-term sustainability concerns for a labor-intensive agricultural sector that relies heavily on manual work. Will there be enough young people to take over? The data suggests not, and that's, a looming crisis.
So it's not just a staple, it's a livelihood for millions, and it clearly has a massive economic footprint that ripples through the entire Philippine economy, influencing everything from household budgets to national policy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, its economic footprint is undeniably profound, influencing national economic indicators at multiple critical levels. Our sources show that rice contributes 13% to the Consumer Price Index, or CPI.
13% to CPI, that's a big chunk.
Huge. It means that even small price fluctuations in rice have a disproportionately significant impact on the overall cost of living for ordinary Filipinos, directly affecting their purchasing power and economic well-being. Furthermore, it contributes a substantial 16% to the gross value added, or GVA, of agriculture.
16% of Ag GVA. Wow.
Indicating its massive share in the overall agricultural output of the country. And on an even broader scale, it accounts for 3.5% of the entire gross domestic product, or GDP, of the Philippines. This profound and pervasive economic importance is precisely why it consistently sits at the very core of government agricultural policies, with significant political attention and resources directed towards ensuring its stability and productivity. It's simply too big to fail for the Philippine economy. Hashtag 1.2, production, consumption, and the import paradox.
So if it's so central, and the Philippines is the 8th largest producer globally, how do we reconcile that with the fact that they are also the world's largest importer? That's a true head-scratcher. It feels inherently counterintuitive to be both a major grower and the biggest buyer.
This is precisely where the paradox becomes clearest and most compelling, highlighting a fundamental structural imbalance. Despite the Philippines reaching a record high of 20.06 million metric tons, or MMT, of Pelé that's pre-husked rice in 2023.
20 million metric tons, that's a record.
Yes, a notable 1.53% increase from 2022 levels. Domestic supply consistently falls short of the burgeoning demand. Even in the first quarter of 2025, Pelé production saw a marginal 0.2% increase from the same period in 2024, reaching 4.69 MMT, with the average yield per hectare rising by 2.3% to 4.09 MT.
Okay, so there's some growth, but
But it's simply not enough. The country dedicates an enormous amount of land to this crop, approximately 4.80 million hectares to rice cultivation, which actually constitutes roughly 2/3 of all Filipino farmland.
2/3 of all farmland is for rice.
Roughly, yes. Yet, despite all these efforts and expensive land use, this monumental domestic production is still insufficient to meet demand, driven by a rapidly growing population, an average of 1.52 million people per year, and evolving dietary preferences. This persistent shortfall leads to a structural reliance on international markets, making imports an absolute necessity to prevent domestic shortages and extreme price volatility.
So imports are a necessity to bridge that demand gap, but there was a truly significant policy shift just a few years ago that really changed the game, effectively liberalizing imports and reshaping the entire industry, right? I'm talking about the Rice Tariffication Law, or RTL.
Yes, the implementation of Republic Act No. 101-1203, more commonly known as the Rice Tariffication Law, in March 2019, was a truly pivotal, even revolutionary moment for the industry. This law dramatically transformed the landscape of rice importation in the Philippines. Previously, imports were governed by quantitative restrictions, meaning there were strict limits, or quotas, on how much rice could be brought into the country. The RTL completely removed these quotas and transitioned rice importation from these restrictions to tariffs, typically ranging from 35–40%.
So instead of a limit, just a tax.
Essentially, yes. The stated primary goal of the RTL was twofold. First, to stabilize and lower consumer rice prices by allowing more supply into the market. And second, to generate funds from these tariffs to modernize the domestic rice sector. Crucially, it also established a mechanism designed to cushion the impact on local farmers, the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, or RCEF.
RCEF, okay.
Which is explicitly designed to channel tariff revenues back into agriculture, funding programs to improve farmer productivity, provide farm machinery, seeds, and training.
And what was the immediate, tangible impact of that law on the ground? Did it achieve its goal of stabilizing consumer prices? And perhaps more importantly, what was the significant trade-off for the millions of local farmers?
Well, the immediate aftermath saw a dramatic and unprecedented surge in imports, far exceeding previous levels. Prior to the RTL, annual imports were typically 2 MMT or below. But in 2019, following the law's implementation, imports jumped sharply to 3.17 MMT.
A big jump.
Huge, immediately solidifying the Philippines' position as the world's top rice importer. This trend has only intensified, with imports reaching a record 4.8 MMT in 2024, valued at an astonishing $2.51 billion.
4.8 million metric tons. Wow.
While the RTL's primary stated goal was indeed to stabilize consumer prices and manage inflation in the rice sector by ensuring a steady and affordable supply, it did so with a significant, often harsh consequence for local producers. The market was suddenly flooded with cheaper foreign rice.
And here's where it gets really interesting and frankly quite challenging for the local farmers, because that sudden influx of cheaper imported rice had a direct, profound, and often devastating effect on them. It wasn't just an abstract economic shift, but a very real hit to their livelihoods and their way of life.
Precisely. The impact was immediate and stark for domestic producers. With landed costs for imported rice as low as P26, P28 per kilo, that's Philippine pesos.
26 to 28 pesos.
Local Pelé prices were significantly depressed, sometimes dropping to P8, P12 per kilo at the farm gate.
8 to 12 pesos. From maybe what, before?
Significantly higher. It varied, but this was a drastic drop. This sharp reduction directly translated to a significant decrease in farmer income per hectare per season. Imagine spending months tilling the land, investing in seeds and labor, only to find the market price for your harvest is barely enough to cover your costs, or even below.
Devastating.
The sources highlight that thousands of rice mills nationwide actually closed due to their inability to compete with the sheer volume and lower cost of imported rice. It became difficult for them to justify buying local Pele above P15, P16 per kilo when imported rice was so much cheaper and readily available.
So the whole chain felt it.
Yes. This highlights a critical tension. The policy aimed at balancing consumer welfare by providing affordable rice, which is crucial for food security, but it did so at the stark expense of the economic viability of the domestic agricultural sector, particularly the millions of smallholder farmers. The RCEF, though intended to mitigate these adverse effects by funding modernization and farmer support, faces an uphill battle against the initial, profound market shock that devastated many local producers, leaving them in a precarious economic position.
It's a classic economic tightrope walk for any government, attempting to balance affordability for its vast consumer base with the sustainability of its vital local producers. And I imagine the types of imported rice are quite diverse, catering to different preferences and culinary uses across the country, further segmenting the market.
They are indeed. Our sources indicate that the imported rice market in the Philippines is quite diverse, reflecting various culinary preferences and functional needs. Top types include fragrant rice like jasmine and DT8, popular for their aroma, soft texture.
Right, the fancy stuff.
Exactly. Often for special occasions or restaurants. There are also various well-milled and regular milled white rice varieties, which serve as the common staple for daily consumption. Additionally, there's glutinous rice, known locally as malakit, essential for traditional desserts and snacks, parboiled rice, known for its firmer texture, and aromatic long-grain varieties like basmati, catering to specific niche markets.
So a whole range.
A whole range. These primarily come from major rice-producing and exporting nations like Vietnam, India, and China, dominant suppliers due to proximity and price. However, there are also smaller, niche quantities imported from countries like Cambodia, Italy, and Spain, catering to more specialized preferences or filling specific supply chain gaps. This diversity means the market is segmented, and local producers face competition not just on price, but also on specific characteristics and qualities of rice.
Okay, let's unpack this crucial question that often gets overlooked. Who actually makes money in the Philippine rice business? We've established the massive economic significance, the huge import numbers, but the sources provide some really eye-opening data here, challenging some common assumptions about where the real value is captured.
This is perhaps one of the most fascinating revelations from our deep dive, truly shedding light on the mechanics of the industry. The rice value chain is multi-layered, involving numerous distinct actors, each performing a specific role. It starts with farmers cultivating the paddy rice, then come primary traders, crucial intermediaries. Next are the millers, processing paddy into milled rice.
Okay.
Following them are the wholesalers distributing it in bulk, and finally the retailers, selling it directly to the consumer. What the data clearly shows is that the distribution of value-added costs the expenses incurred at each stage, and crucially, the profits, is highly uneven across these participants.
Yeah.
It's not a uniform split at all.
So if we look at the entire process of getting rice from the field to your kitchen, who contributes the most in terms of labor, capital, and resources? Where is the greatest investment happening along that chain?
From the perspective of value-added cost, it's actually the millers who contribute the highest, accounting for approximately 40.39% of the total cost in commercial rice production.
40% from the millers. Why so high?
This significant share is primarily due to the labor-intensive drying process, which is absolutely critical for preserving quality and preventing spoilage, and the substantial capital investment required for specialized machinery drying facilities, storage, milling equipment.
Right, that infrastructure costs money.
Exactly. Farmers follow closely, contributing around 39.22% of the value-added cost, largely attributable to the highly labor-intensive nature of paddy production itself, planting, cultivating, harvesting, plus the significant expenses for inputs like seedlings, fertilizers, pesticides.
So farmers and millers carry most of the cost burden.
They do. Primary traders account for about 10.93% of the value-added cost, wholesalers 6.72%, and retailers contribute the lowest at 2.07%. This shows the initial production and primary processing stages are the most resource-intensive.
Now here's where it gets really interesting and potentially quite misleading for anyone trying to understand the economic realities. When we talk about profitability as a percentage of profit to cost, The farmers, at first glance, appear to be doing remarkably well, at least on paper, right? This is the initial aha moment for many.
Based purely on that metric, profit as a percentage of their direct costs? Yes, that is precisely what the initial numbers suggest, and it can be highly deceptive. Farmers show the highest return at a seemingly impressive 32.36%.
32%. That sounds great.
It does, on the surface. Retailers are next at 8.48%, indicating a decent margin. Primary traders come in at 5.11%, followed by millers at 2.32%, and wholesalers at the lowest, with just 1.68%. This percentage metric, in isolation, might lead one to conclude that farmers are quite profitable on a per-unit basis, maybe suggesting their poverty isn't as dire as commonly portrayed. But this is where understanding the full picture becomes absolutely critical.
But percentage profit can be incredibly deceiving, especially when you consider the absolute profit generated and, critically, the operating cycle of each actor in the chain. This is the nugget of knowledge that truly surprised me from the sources, revealing the actual stark dynamics of wealth distribution within the Philippine rice industry.
This raises an extremely important question. What does a high percentage profit truly mean if your volume of sales is minute, or if your operational cycle is incredibly long? Let's look at the farmers first, and this is where the paradox of their situation becomes painfully clear. Despite their seemingly impressive 32.36% profit margin on a per kilogram basis, they earn an average of only P4.16 per kilogram of paddy rice.
4 pesos per kilo profit.
Yes. However, their operating cycle is not daily or weekly. It spans a grueling 4 to 5 months, encompassing the entire farming process from preparing the land to planting, cultivating, and finally harvesting.
4 to 5 months to realize that profit.
Exactly. This extended cycle results in a remarkably low average monthly profit of approximately P5,080 or a mere P169.33 per day.
170 pesos a day.
Think about that. P169 a day to feed a family. When you consider the entire value chain, this constitutes only a tiny 1.88% of the total daily profit generated by all actors combined. Their overall profitability is severely constrained by the inherently small scale of their operations, with average farm areas dropping to just 0.83 hectares in 2022, and that exceptionally long, labor-intensive production cycle.
Less than a hectare on average.
Right. For many, their annual income, for example, documented as $2,000 or P116,000 in 2018, remains stubbornly below the poverty threshold of P129,000 in 2018, with farm workers earning even less. This suggests that simply increasing their per-unit profit isn't enough to lift them out of poverty. Addressing their scale, improving yields, reducing production costs, and providing better access to financial resources are absolutely crucial. It's a classic case of high margin, low volume, and long turnover.
So if it's not the farmers in absolute terms, then who is making the most money? The data points squarely to the primary traders, right? They're positioned perfectly in that value chain, acting as a crucial bottleneck.
Precisely. Despite a seemingly modest lower percentage profit of 5.11% on their costs, primary traders emerge as the highest earning participants in the value chain in absolute terms by a significant margin. What's fascinating here is their exceptionally short operating cycle of just 3 to 5 days.
3 to 5 days, compared to the farmers' 4 to 5 months.
Exactly. During this incredibly brief window, they efficiently collect paddy rice from numerous individual farmers, often perform initial sun drying if needed, and then quickly sell it to millers. This rapid turnover is their strategic advantage. This allows them to accumulate a total income of P32,500 within this brief time frame, which translates to a staggering daily profit of P6,825.
6,800 pesos a day.
This alone represents a massive 72.58% of the total daily earnings generated across the entire rice value chain. It's a remarkable concentration of profit.
That's a real aha moment right there. So these primary traders effectively bridge the gap between numerous, often fragmented, small-scale farmers and larger processors, capitalizing on farmers' urgent, immediate need to sell quickly post-harvest because they lack the necessary storage and drying facilities.
Exactly. This dynamic highlights a critical point of value capture. Primary traders exploit the farmer's acute vulnerability, stemming from a lack of adequate post-harvest infrastructure and limited access to real-time market information. Farmers, unable to store their produce or process it further, are compelled to sell immediately after harvest when supply is abundant and prices are typically lowest, often to the first buyer offering cash.
They have no choice, basically.
Very little leverage. This dependency gives primary traders significant power, allowing them to buy low and sell quickly. For farmers to significantly improve their income, they would need to either integrate forward into trading activities themselves, perhaps through robust cooperatives
Right.
that can pool resources for collective storage and direct sales, or gain enhanced access to crucial post-harvest infrastructure and better market information. This would reduce their dependency on traders and empower them to negotiate more favorable farm gate prices, fundamentally altering the profit distribution.
And what about the other actors in the chain, the millers, wholesalers, and retailers? How do their absolute profits stack up in this highly competitive import-influenced market?
Millers, who generate P 0.81 profit per kilogram of milled rice, have the potential for substantial monthly income, reaching up to P 50,625, which translates to P 1,687.50 per day. That's about 17.94% of the total daily profit.
Okay, decent for the millers.
Yes, driven by their average production volume. Wholesalers achieve a profit of P 0.64 per unit, translating to an average of P 17,513.01 per month, or P 583.77 per day. Retailers, while earning a net profit of P 3.32 per kilogram, a relatively high per unit margin, similar to farmers on percentage basis, are the lowest overall profit earners in absolute terms due to smaller individual volumes and higher overheads.
So the corner store isn't getting rich off rice.
Generally not. Their average monthly profit is P 4,152.45, only P 138.41 per day. This contributes only a tiny 1.47% of the total income across the chain. The table from the source material clearly illustrates these stark disparities, making it evident that the short operating cycle and high volume handled by primary traders give them an unparalleled advantage in absolute profit generation. Hashtag 2.2. Is the market saturated? Competitiveness unpacked.
So bringing all this together, what does this complex picture tell us about market saturation and competitiveness in the Philippine rice industry? Is the market simply flooded with supply, or is there still room to grow for local producers and for new players to enter?
Well, the sources describe a very complex market dynamic, not a simple binary case of saturated or unsaturated. Historically, even before the RTL, per hectare rice yields in the Philippines have significantly lagged behind other major Asian producers like Vietnam and Thailand.
Lower yields to start with.
Yes. This, coupled with domestic prices being about 50% more expensive than imported rice back in 2014-2015, created a challenging and inherently uncompetitive environment for local producers, even before full import liberalization. They were already operating at a disadvantage.
And the rice tariffication law, the RTL, dramatically amplified this competitive pressure, didn't it? It opened the floodgates.
It profoundly reshaped it, intensifying the competitive landscape beyond what many local farmers could withstand. While the RTO was intended to stabilize consumer prices and generate funds via the RCEF, its immediate effect was that sharp, rapid increase in rice imports. This influx of cheaper foreign rice, in turn, caused local Pele prices to decline significantly and farmer incomes to drop, often dramatically. Farmers frequently expressed dread during harvest season, calling it a perennial pricing dilemma.
Dread, that's a strong word.
It reflects their reality. They know prices will likely be depressed. The sources point to an opaque value chain where farm gate prices can increase by 80% to 190% by the time it reaches retail,
A huge markup.
making price setting difficult to pinpoint, often benefiting intermediaries more. The cheaper imported rice, landed at P26, P28 per kilo, directly pushed local Pele prices down to as low as P8, P12, making it tough for millers to buy local above P15, P16.
But then we saw retail prices spike sharply in 2023, even with record local production that year. How does that fit into this picture of price depression due to imports? It seems like a contradiction.
Right, it does seem counterintuitive. This raises an important question about the influence of global factors, showing the Philippine market isn't isolated. Despite record local Pele production in 2023, retail prices unexpectedly skyrocketed, reaching P49 for regular milled and nearly P55 for well-milled rice.
55 pesos a kilo, ouch.
This surge was heavily influenced by global events, specifically India's unexpected export ban in July 2023. India is often the largest global rice exporter.
Ah, the indie ban, that caused ripples everywhere.
Exactly. Their ban sent shockwaves, severely restricting global supply. In the Philippines, this led to a massive 75% increase in rice imports that August, as the country scrambled to secure supply. But critically, these imports came at prices 22% higher, around $654 per ton. This shows that while steady imports can depress local prices, global supply shocks can still significantly drive up consumer costs, creating a volatile market.
So vulnerable to both cheap imports and global price spikes.
Precisely. Recent data from March 2024 to March 2025 indicates a consistent downward trend in average rice prices across all market levels, farm gate, wholesale, and retail, despite that slight increase in Pele production in Q1 2025. The market seems to be finding its balance post-shock. Government procurement at P18, P24 per kilo offers some price support, but its limited scale might not be enough to shield most farmers from these wider movements.
So pulling all that together to directly answer our question, is the market saturated or not? It sounds like it's saturated with one thing, but not necessarily another. Can you clarify that nuance for us?
You've got it. Our sources clarify that the domestic market is not necessarily saturated in terms of overall supply, meeting the nation's total consumption demand. That's clear from the continued high import volumes needed annually to bridge that gap. The country still needs more rice than it produces.
Okay, so not saturated with supply overall.
Correct. Rather, it is saturated with cheaper imported rice, which creates intense and often overwhelming price competition for locally produced rice. This makes it incredibly challenging for domestic rice to compete effectively on price alone, given higher production costs and a less efficient domestic value chain. This situation creates a fundamental, ongoing policy dilemma, balancing consumer access to affordable rice, a food security imperative, with the economic viability and welfare of local farmers. The current dynamic strongly suggests a highly competitive environment where local producers face significant pressure from international markets and a complex domestic value chain. It's a fight for survival for many local growers.
So we've painted a pretty challenging picture, especially for the farmers themselves, who seem to bear the brunt of many market shifts. Let's really dig into the specific systemic challenges outlined in the sources. Because they're not isolated, they're deeply interconnected, creating a complex web of obstacles.
They are indeed a complex, interconnected system undermining profitability and sustainability for producers. First, and critically, farmers face prohibitively high input costs. They struggle with escalating expenses for critical inputs like fertilizers, essential for decent yields, and high-yield seed grains.
Fertilizer prices have been crazy globally, too.
Exactly. Access to mechanized farm equipment, which could boost efficiency, is also a massive hurdle due to cost. Compounding this, crop loans are scarce and incredibly difficult to obtain from formal institutions, leaving farmers without capital.
No access to credit.
Very limited. The rising prices of these inputs squeeze farmers, often forcing them back to less efficient, traditional methods, perpetuating a cycle of low productivity and debt. Many operate at a loss or just break even.
And then, even if they manage a good harvest, despite those input challenges, the battle continues post-harvest. That's another major hurdle that eats into their margins.
What's fascinating and incredibly frustrating here is the substantial post-harvest losses, estimated at up to a staggering 40% for key crops, including rice.
40% loss after harvest.
Up to 40%. Imagine cultivating for months, only to lose nearly half of it afterwards. This occurs due to inadequate storage facilities, paddy spoils. Poor farm-to-market roads make transport slow and costly, and insufficient equipment for proper drying and protection from exposure, pests, moisture.
So they can't store it properly, can't dry it properly, can't transport it easily.
Right. This deficiency directly compels farmers to sell immediately after harvest, when supply is abundant and prices are lowest, further eroding their income. They simply have no leverage to wait for better market conditions. It's a fire sale situation.
Climate change is a massive looming existential threat too, isn't it? The Philippines seems particularly vulnerable.
Absolutely. Highly susceptible. Experiencing an average of 20 typhoons annually, which regularly devastate agricultural lands.
20 typhoons a year.
On average. Climate modeling predicts significant declines in domestic rice production due to more frequent, ferocious typhoons, prolonged droughts, and extreme temperatures. The sources highlight a stark statistic. Just a 1 degree C increase in average annual minimum temperature could lead to a 10% decline in rice yield.
10% drop from 1 degree Celsius. That's huge.
It is. Beyond that, saltwater intrusion in key coastal rice bowls threatens to make land unusable. Increased flooding and landslides disrupt production and transportation. It's an ongoing, escalating threat to food security.
And tying back to our earlier discussion, the import competition stemming directly from the RTL is a constant, unyielding pressure.
Indeed. The persistent influx of cheaper rice imports, particularly from Vietnam, consistently undercuts domestic prices, making it extremely difficult for Filipino farmers to compete. The post-RTL surge directly correlated with sharp declines in local tele prices and farmer incomes. This market pressure is compounded by a slow, steady decline in domestic rice consumption over past decades as diets slightly shift. It's a squeeze from both sides.
What about issues like land ownership? That can often be a root cause of poverty in agricultural communities.
That raises an important point, and it's a significant factor in the Philippines. A substantial number of farmers don't own the land they cultivate. They're tenants or leaseholders.
So they pay rent on top of everything else.
Exactly. High land rent costs siphon away a substantial portion of their potential earnings, exacerbating financial struggles. Despite decades of agrarian reform programs, these often fail to address the underlying causes of poverty, leaving many in precarious tenure situations with little security to invest long-term.
And you mentioned the aging farmer population earlier. That's a fundamental challenge for the future.
Yes. The demographic reality is sobering. Average age 53 to 56. Fewer younger individuals are opting for farming, viewing it as unlucrative, arduous, lacking mobility.
Can't blame them, given what we've discussed.
It's understandable. This trend portends a decline in productivity as the workforce ages and shrinks, raising profound concerns about the sustainability of a labor-intensive sector. Who will feed the next generation?
Beyond demographics, are farmers equipped with the modern skills and technology needed for competitive farming today?
Our sources indicate many possess limited skills in managing operations as, say, agribusiness ventures. They often lack knowledge for financial management, market analysis, even basic record keeping. There's a pervasive lack of access to modern inputs beyond basics, technical know-how in areas like precision farming or sustainable land use, and advanced technology. This is often compounded by infrequent participation in training programs.
So a skills and technology gap, too.
A significant one. They aren't regularly exposed to new methods that could transform their practices.
And finally, there are broader institutional weaknesses hindering progress, these underlying structural issues.
This includes a weak institutional framework for seed development. Only a few seed companies operate, limiting private sector engagement, and crucially, the availability of climate-smart seed varieties resilient to extreme weather.
Can't get the right seeds easily.
Exactly. Access to crop insurance is also challenging, difficult to avail, complex requirements, payouts often delayed, leaving them vulnerable after losses. Rice mills also face issues: inadequate paddy supply, irregular power, insufficient bank credit to modernize. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these challenges aren't isolated. They form a complex system reinforcing farmer vulnerabilities. Addressing poverty and enhancing competitiveness requires a holistic, integrated approach tackling finance, infrastructure, climate resilience, market linkages all at once. Hashtag 2.3.2. Significant opportunities for growth.
So despite all these formidable challenges that clearly weigh heavily, creating what seems like an uphill battle, the sources also point to significant, tangible opportunities for growth and modernization. Where do these pathways to a more resilient and profitable future lie?
What's fascinating here is that despite the complexities, there are clear, actionable pathways forward. Our sources highlight several key areas. First, robust government support is crucial. While the RTL had initial shocks, mechanisms like the RCEF are in place, designed to fund modernization and farmer support. If effectively implemented and expanded, this fund offers a vital financial backbone.
Okay, so government support through RCEF is one potential lever.
A major one. And technology must play a massive, transformative role in overcoming limitations, particularly around climate vulnerability and efficiency.
What kind of technologies are we talking about?
The adoption of advanced climate-resilient and nutrient-enhanced technologies presents a massive opportunity. This includes new rice varieties that withstand droughts, floods, higher temperatures, essentially future-proofing the crop. Also, biofortified varieties with enhanced nutritional value. Strategic mechanization is key to improving efficiency, reducing labor dependency, lowering costs, reducing post-harvest losses.
Mechanization like tractors, or smaller scale.
Appropriate scale is key. Not just massive tractors, but tools like small rice transplanters, combined harvesters, mechanical dryers, suitable for fragmented land holdings, things that actually fit the reality on the ground.
Beyond just producing more basic milled rice, are there opportunities for adding value, diversifying to capture higher margins?
Yes, definitely. The development of high value-added rice products offers significant potential beyond the volatile commodity price of white rice. Think rice flour, rice noodles, rice wine, rice-based snacks, specialty organic or colored rice varieties that fetch premium prices.
Moving up the value chain.
Exactly. Such diversification allows producers to tap into niche markets with higher profit margins, reducing reliance on basic white rice prices. For potential entrepreneurs and investors, success requires a strategic approach, assessing entry points, commitment to efficiency and quality control, proactive supplier and customer relationships, and embracing innovation and sustainability.
So, bringing all these elements together, the challenges and these compelling opportunities, what does this all mean for the future of the Philippine rice industry? What's the ultimate vision?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, leveraging government programs, engaging with research institutions for tech transfer, and fostering cooperative development among farmers are crucial for navigating the market and ensuring long-term viability. Strong farmer cooperatives could pool resources, invest in post-harvest facilities, negotiate better prices, maybe even explore direct marketing.
Empowering the farmers themselves through collective action.
Precisely. The future lies not just in increasing volume, but in transforming into a more efficient, resilient, and equitable agribusiness ecosystem. An industry that balances economic objectives, food security, profitability with social responsibilities, uplifting farmers, sustainable livelihoods, and environmental responsibilities, adopting sustainable, climate-smart practices. It's a vision where technology and smart policy empower the very people who feed the nation to thrive. #outro.
So there you have it, a deep dive into the fascinating, complex, and often paradoxical world of the Philippine rice industry. We've seen how this vital staple underpins the nation's economy and feeds its people, yet faces immense pressures from climate change, global market forces, and systemic issues like lack of post-harvest facilities and high input costs that too often keep its primary producers, the farmers, struggling below the poverty line despite their immense efforts.
And we've also uncovered that while farmers may exhibit the highest percentage profit relative to their direct costs, it's the primary traders, with their exceptionally rapid turnover and strategic position, who capture the lion's share of absolute daily profits in the value chain. This highlights critical choke points and significant opportunities for value capture that could, with the right interventions, dramatically improve farmer livelihoods.
This raises an important question for you, our listener. Given the intricate balance between ensuring consumer access to affordable rice and securing the economic viability of local farmers, what innovative solutions, perhaps drawing from technology, policy, or community empowerment, could truly empower the unsung heroes of this industry, the farmers, to thrive in a globalized market? How can a nation like the Philippines balance its essential food security needs with the welfare of those who tirelessly work to feed it? Something to mull over as you enjoy your next meal.